We are talking of an unstable neighborhood to Sri Lanka, where the country continues to be racked by the economic crisis. Today, the finance minister resigned. People remain outraged. Pressure continues to mount on the Rajapaksa government. Ashutosh Mishra is on ground zero in Colombo, brings you this exclusive ground report from a country in turmoil. Take a look.
A crippling economic crisis, marathon power cuts daily, huge crunch of essential commodities, skyrocketing prices, widespread unrest, protests and anger. Runaway inflation has put Sri Lanka on edge, sparking unrelenting protests against the government. Widespread anger has brought the island nation to its knees, forcing the entire cabinet of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to quit. The central bank governor too has resigned, but protesters demand the resignation of the president himself, as his government has little clue on how to fight the worst economic crisis in Lankan history.
Security arrangements by the government, which claims to be maintaining the law and order, but here, since it's the suffering of the people, they are agitating, they are protesting. The fuel prices, of course, there are no fuel at all, there is no foreign reserve to import, there is a rocket high inflation, soaring inflation that is affecting the common people, and that's exactly triggered this massive agitation against the government. The crisis here at ground zero continues.
Government in change, okay. You know why? The president is very bad. Big brother, younger brother. Government no money, people no money. Poor people, me okay, second class. Poor people, nothing. What they can do? They cheat the people.
Farmers not giving the pressurizer and chemical.
Okay.
And after, the main thing is a power cut. That's the reason the increase.
Amidst this ongoing crisis, a state of emergency had been declared last week by the beleaguered government. Strict security is in place after spates of vandalism in Colombo and elsewhere. Damage worth 4 crore Sri Lankan rupees has been reported till now, and it's rising. The government had earlier imposed a ban on all social media, which has now been lifted. The Lankan opposition has also cornered the Rajapaksa government, seeking international help to fight the crisis, partly triggered by $4 billion worth of international debt.
Right now, Sri Lanka is subjected to a variety of vulnerabilities. We are whichever subject area, we are vulnerable. And that vulnerability has been caused by the misgovernance of this present administration.
To contain the situation, the Lankan president has asked the opposition to join the government. With Ashutosh Mishra in Colombo, Sri Lanka, Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, let's go straight across then to former Prime Minister, senior Sri Lanka politician Ranil Wickremesinghe joins me. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Wickremesinghe. Would I be right in saying this is effectively the worst moment that Sri Lanka has faced in its independent history? Some would say it's almost as bad as the terror strikes during the LTT years that crippled your country during for almost over a decade.
Yeah. Economically, I would say it's even worse than the time of the LTT. It's the worst time we've had since we became independent in 1948. In political terms, yes, it's a very bad situation. But this is the first time that you have seen the people get onto the streets. It is basically similar to an Arab Spring or what happened in Ukraine in 2014. It's led by the middle class and young people. The political parties have been shoved to a side.
Interesting, you're likening what is happening in Sri Lanka to Arab Spring, suggesting it's a popular revolt against the Rajapaksa government. As an opposition leader, is that how you're seeing it, that this movement is not being driven by the opposition? You're claiming it's being driven by the people of Sri Lanka. Am I correct?
It's a popular uprising against the government. which is just continuing.
But interestingly, Mr. Wickremesinghe, today the government, Rajapaksa government, has said this is a moment for all parties to come together. President Rajapaksa has offered that you and other opposition leaders can join his government. Ministers have resigned, including members of the Rajapaksa family, including the finance minister. They are proposing a kind of national government in Sri Lanka's hour of crisis, saying set aside political differences, let's work together. Are you ready to work together with the government?
When the all-party conference was summoned last week, the Tamil National Alliance and the UNP were both present, and we recommended a committee consisting of leaders of the parties in parliament and the president to get together to work out the crisis and to have discussions. We prefer to have, we had a discussion today, the TNA and the UNP, and our view is that we should stick to it. We are not interested in actually holding office or taking ministries, but we are prepared to help the government in this through this committee that we had proposed earlier.
You know, Mr. Wickremesinghe, the government is saying that this has been building up in Sri Lanka over the years. They accuse even your government of being profligate. They're saying the last few years with the COVID pandemic, tourism being destroyed, the Ukrainian crisis, all of this has resulted in the present balance of payments and debt crisis that Sri Lanka faces. Do you accept that you can't really blame the Rajapaksa government alone for this economic crisis?
I don't accept it. The IMF report says it started from 2019 November, but I don't want to get in and argue with them. Well, I said just look at the problem and resolve the problem, not start and look at the history of the problem or where it started, who was responsible. We can't go on like that. Just look at the problem. And the main issue is the IMF says this is an issue concerning the balance of payments and the debt overhang. And our debt is not sustainable. The central bank and the treasury has put in their views saying that this is all a temporary phenomena which will sort of fall into place when money comes in from tourism and the remittances from foreign employees, neither of which is happening. So this is the basic issue that the government has to settle before they go to the IMF.
But Mr. Wickremesinghe, do you therefore see a solution? Is there a silver bullet out there, given the scale of the balance of payments crisis, that can at least halt the slide that Sri Lanka finds itself in today, for now?
No, we've got to start working on this, build up confidence. There is no confidence. Without confidence, you have to anticipate a slide. We have to build up confidence, and I've been calling for a consortium of India, China, Japan, South Korea and EU to help us along this. It's a sort of some form of bridging finance that we have to find, because I think with the Indian help, the money we have received will run out in mid-May. So we'll again go back to the shortages, and by June, the factories and business enterprises will have to close because foreign exchange is not available for raw material.
It's interesting you mentioned India and China there. Now, India has reached out to you, providing you bridging loans, but the country that has deep interest there with the Rajapaksa government in Sri Lanka is China. What are you seeing? What role is China going to play now in Sri Lanka, Mr. Wickremesinghe, given China's economic clout?
China provided a loan, but in their own currency, a credit line in yuan, so you have to purchase in China. But now there is a discussion on, the government has requested China for $2.5 billion, $1 billion for the financial facilities and $1.5 billion on line of credit.
One final question, Mr. Wickremesinghe. Do you see these street protests now continuing for a while? You called it initially on this show an Arab Spring moment for Sri Lanka. Are you saying that this, do you get a sense this is general anger against the political class in Sri Lanka also, which seems to have fattened itself at the expense of the common people of Sri Lanka, that people are protesting against a corrupted political class as much as they are about what's happened with the economy?
Actually, the protest will continue, in my view. There is also resentment against the political parties. Partly the government, they feel that deceived them when they got their vote at the presidential election, and secondly, they feel that the opposition political parties have been ineffective and they are just focusing on their own political needs.
Ranil Wickremesinghe speaking to me there from Colombo and calling it Sri Lanka's Arab Spring moment. Thanks very much for joining me on the news today.